So, I've been combing the internet lately, and I've seen something wrong with the Percy Jackson videos on YouTube. For some reason, the videos are either how to get started in Percy Jackson, a review of what people think about when they read Percy Jackson for the first time, or comparing Percy Jackson to Harry Potter. Those are the three kind of Percy Jackson videos I've seen, but I've never seen a video telling people why they should read Percy Jackson. Well, today I'm going to make that very video, why you should read or watch Percy Jackson, Asterisk, and you'll end up loving it. Alright, this video is sponsored by no one. It's sponsored by no one. I don't have enough subscribers for a sponsor. Anywho, I'm the son of Poseidon. The world building. So I'm going to be looking at my notes a lot. So if you see me looking down, that's me looking at my notes. So Percy Jackson's uniqueness starts in its world building. I also flub a lot. So we're just going to have to deal with my flubs. Flubs, blah, 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 blah. What can I do? What's so unique about its world is that it's not unique at all. It's actually quite normal. I like to call it normal with a twist. You see, Percy Jackson is a modern day fantasy, meaning that the story is written in the same time and era that the novelist is writing in. But unlike most modern fantasies, Percy Jackson doesn't just take you to a new or hidden world. What's actually really wonderful about Percy Jackson is that our world is the hidden world. You will know most of the locations that they go to in Percy Jackson. Like, for example, the Empire State Building. The Empire State Building exists in our world. But in Percy Jackson, everything that exists in that world has a deeper meaning. The Empire State Building doubles as the gateway to Mount Olympus. It's not Mount Olympus itself, but it's a gateway going into Mount Olympus. Nothing about our world actually changes. They just add onto our world. And it's like, really, I think it's genius, because that means we don't have to spend a whole lot of time getting accustomed to the laws and rules of this world when it is in and of itself our own world already. But what's so unique about using our own world, and what's so hard about using our own world, is that everyone is accustomed to it. Everyone's used to it. So when you get used to something, you want to start looking in subtle ways to see the subtle changes. Percy Jackson actually uses these interesting and unique ways of keeping the reader's attention. For example, you know how fantasy worlds have like a hub that they always go back to? Well, for Percy Jackson, the hub would be Camp Half-Blood, which is basically, it's in his name, it's a camp for demigods. I'll get into details about what Camp Half-Blood really is later into the video, but for now, all you need to know is that Camp Half-Blood is a camp for demigods. It's like a normal camp. You do activities, canoe races, rock climbing walls. But remember what I said about Percy Jackson. There's normal, but with a twist. So they have all these normal activities, but at the same time, they have activities like sword fighting, and they have things like Greek mythology lessons, and they have games like Capture the Flag. Oh, wait, Capture the Flag is normal. It is not normal. They give the kids real freaking swords. They give them real swords, and they give them real shields. Swords and shields. Who wouldn't want to play Capture the Flag with a sword and a shield? Come on, like, that is awesome. Like, who wouldn't want to do that? As the franchise continues, they actually keep this normal with a twist mindset, and they barely stray from it. Whether it's giving a main character a pin that doubles as a sword, or a baseball cap that lets you turn invisible, they normally like to stay within that normal with a twist guidelines. Oh, this is a dodgeball game? Psych, it's a dodgeball game that if you get hit by the ball, you die. Oh, this is an Amazon warehouse? What can be so weird about that? It's ruled by actual Amazons. Actual Amazons. Run, Amazon. Okay, in my defense, that last one's probably really obvious, but there's a reason why I use that example, because we're going to get into my next aspect, which is story. There are more little subtle twists throughout the story that I want to kind of keep close to my chest. Cabin 9, how they handle their bunkers. Other books do this kind of, act between normal with the twist, but Percy Jackson does it so well and they balance it so perfectly that sometimes I just forget that I'm in a fantasy book until I'm reminded. For example, you'll see things that make sense if you added it to real life, like, of course the Aphrodite kids would be the popular kids in school. Of course the Aries kids would be all just egotistical jerks who always want to show off what they can do. Of course the gods would have their own cable network so they can watch all the hot god goss. Yes, that is true. They do have a god network for television. Moving on.
Every demi has a special skill. Speed or brains or the strength of will.
So far I've been hitting on a lot of points that you see in the movies. Yes, the movies, those monstrosities. But the reason I've been using the movie's story is because I want to talk about examples without having to spoil the entire book for you. As you can see in the description down below, I put read/watch with an asterisk in the description and in the title, and that's for a good reason. I don't really want you to watch the Percy Jackson movie. I want you to watch the Disney Plus show that's coming out fairly soon. I'm actually making this video in hopes that it will get people to read the books so that we can get more people to watch the show. And who knows, maybe when the show, gets greenlit or when the show's being advertised, people might see this video and say, oh, I guess there's more to the story than just what's on the surface, because there is so much more to the story than what the monstrous movies have shown you. That being said, I'm really contradicting myself over here. That being said, if you watch the first two movies, you kind of know how the first two books will progress. And you kind of don't. Let me explain. The movies are like the basic outline of what the first and the second book were, minus like the endings, because the endings, I don't know where they got the second book ending from. Don't quote me. I don't understand. It's shenanigans. The second movie's ending is not canon. Don't believe that. But most of the most of the two movies actually, follow the structure of what Percy Jackson's book 1 and 2 kind of followed. So if you liked those movies, you will love the books. I cannot stress that if you liked the Percy Jackson movies, you are going to love the books, because the books go into greater detail than the movies ever did. Remember, movies outline, book actual story. Outline, actual story. Outline, actual story. So with that being said, I know Uncle Rick being the author, Rick Riordan, Uncle Rick is the nickname that the fan base has given him. That being said, Uncle Rick, I know he hates the movies, but we have to give credit where credit is due. The movies did bring in a lot more fans who wanted to know how the story progressed, and I can never fault them for that, except for the ending and the fact that they didn't have any of the campers wearing Camp Half-Blood shirts. Why did you have Camp Half-Blood shirts? So with that PSA out of the way, I have to talk about the story. Their books don't follow an overarching story until it does. Let me explain. On their own, they are phenomenal. You can pick up, for example, Titan's Curse and understand completely what's going on, kinda. Basically, sum her up, character gets kidnapped. We have to spend the whole book trying to rescue character from being kidnapped. And, spoiler alert, we get the character from being kidnapped. Titan's Curse, everybody. However, each book adds to an underlying narrative that adds up to a mini spoiler. Not really. But I'll give you some examples. You know how Frodo has to destroy the ring? How Harry has to kill Voldemort? I'll give you some time to cover your ears if you don't want to hear this. 3, 2, 1. Percy has 2 goals that he needs to do. He has to destroy the perception that the gods have about him and who he is. And second, he has to destroy Kronos. Those are the two main things that Percy has to do within all the first 5 books. He has to do all this before his 17th birthday, and all of it against his will, because that's the destiny he was born with. His 2 goals are always hovering over him from beginning to end of each and every book. In every choice he makes, it is constantly hanging over his head with every page you flip. This choice he made, will this make the gods hate him more? This other choice he made, will this bring him closer to defeating Kronos? We don't know. The end goal is by no means the only importance for this story. Each book has Percy in a new situation, and he's fighting for his life in each and every one. But no matter how dangerous the current situation is for Percy Jackson, he is always reminded of what he needs to do and why he's doing it. Alone, the books are brave and heroic, but with each passing book, it grows closer and closer to the end goal of Percy's destiny. The weight on his shoulders grows heavier and heavier as he gets older and his destiny gets closer, until he is there on that fateful day where he has to make the ultimate decision. But what does he choose? You have to read to find that out. And don't get me wrong, Percy isn't the only one affected by his own personal destiny. Each book has great sacrifice, great loss, and each loss hurts as much as the last. Percy Jackson is able to pull this off and make its readers feel all these emotions for all these kinds of grievances and triumphs and defeats, which is really hard for a book to do. But Percy Jackson can do it for one reason. And in my opinion, that Percy Jackson does this better than any of the other fantasy books out there. Percy Jackson makes me actually feel for their characters.
I didn't want to be a half-blood. I didn't ask to be a hero seeking praise. Being a half-blood, it's scary. It mostly gets you killed in very nasty ways.
Now, with all that said out the way, let's get into the meat of what makes Percy Jackson, Percy Jackson. The character! Do you want well-written boys? Do you want well-written girls? Do you want relationships? What kind of relationships do you want? Do you want straight? Do you want gay? We got it. Do you want strong characters? We got it. Do you want weak characters? We got that too. Do you want women who can kick butt? And do you want men who don't run away from battles? Or let's reverse it. Do you want damsels in distress? And do you want men to run from battles? We got it. Do you want black, Asian, Hispanic, Latino, Italian, white, Indian, Native American? We got it. You name it, we have it. Do you want trans characters? We got trans characters. Percy Jackson has a rainbow of characters with a rainbow of personalities. If there's a character you want, Percy Jackson has it. If you haven't seen it yet, keep reading his spin-off novels. You'll find one character that you can relate to. For me, it's my boy Nico D'Angelo and Leo Valdez. I love them both so much. But all jokes aside, the real importance of Percy Jackson's characters are their flaws. Every single character of every single book, of every single spin-off, in every single franchise of the Percy Jackson world, all characters have fatal flaws. And in my opinion, that makes them more real. What is a fatal flaw? Thank you for asking. I'll explain. A fatal flaw is something that makes a character's or leads to a character's downfall. For example, Achilles, he had his heel. One hit to that, crumbles to dust. Tony Stark's fatal flaw, his hubris. He thinks that he knows everything and can do everything on his own. It's not even a character or a movie thing. Everyone in the world has multiple flaws, but you can find someone's one fatal flaw. And their fatal flaw is what grounds them as a character, as a person. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I'd like to take the time to introduce the 3 main characters of Percy Jackson. We have Percy Jackson, Annabeth Chase, and Grover Underwood. And yes, he has goat legs. Percy Jackson has an array of characters, but today I'm going to only focus on the main 3. If I talk about anyone else, I'll be mentioning their names in passing. I will not be going into great detail of anyone else. Let's start with the big man himself, Percy Jackson. What makes him so different than, let's say, Harry Potter? I know, I'm a walking hypocrite. Percy comes from a broken home, much like Harry Potter. The only difference is that he still has his mother, who loves him for both mother and father equally. He suffers from ADHD, and he's been kicked out of multiple schools, like a lot of schools. Percy is what our world would call a problem child. Things just tend to happen when Percy magically appears. So what's our solution? Expel him. Society would have labeled Percy Jackson as a problem child. And granted, they have all the rights to. He always gets into trouble, and he's always where he's not supposed to. But this is a reoccurring theme for Percy's character and his character development. Percy has no control over what happens around him or in his life. Things constantly happen around him, and he has no control over what happens and what he can do about it. For example, the first line in The Lightning Thief is, "I never wanted to be a demigod," showing you just how little control Percy has over his own life and what he is. You see, unlike Harry Potter, who had the choice to go with Hagrid and go off to Hogwarts, Percy had no choice. He was forced to go to Camp Half-Blood. He was forced to watch his mother get captured. He was forced to do everything. You see, these are two types of characters in not only novels, but in media as well. Harry is what you would call a call to action, meaning someone is called to do something. Like Neo choosing to take the red pill over the blue pill. He doesn't have to do anything, but he chooses to take the red pill. While Percy is what we like to call a push to action. Lightning McQueen never wanted to end up in that town. He was literally dropped there in the movie Cars. Push to action means you are put in a situation that is completely out of your control, and you are forced to go on that set path that is laid out for you. And that is what Percy Jackson's life is. A constant, everyday push to action. From the moment he was born, he shouldn't exist. His father, Poseidon, and his two brothers, Zeus and Hades, also known as the Big Three, made a deal to no longer have any more demigod children because of a prophecy that states that one of their children is going to bring the end of all days for Olympus, or he'll be their greatest savior. But why take that risk? Why even humor the thought of having a child that could bring the end to all of the gods on Mount Olympus? But what is strange is that's the exact thing that Poseidon did. Poseidon sired a son that should have never existed, and this son had to run across New England Sound with his mother in tow while being chased by a monster for a crime he did not commit. And as they reached to the camp that he was told he had to arrive to, he had to leave his mother behind because she was not a demigod. And he sat and watched as his mother, the one light in his life, was taken away from him. Again, out of Percy's control. And while we're on Camp Half-Blood, I'd like to talk about that camp just for a second. Because Percy isn't the only demigod there that doesn't want to be there. For you and me, waking up one morning, being told you're a demigod, and being shipped off to a camp to hone your skills, that'd be the coolest thing ever. But for most of the demigod children in Percy Jackson, that's a living nightmare. Sure, all the campers are put into cabins with their demigod siblings. And sure, they're all safe within the borders of the camp as long as they never leave. But why are they there in the first place? Why hasn't their parents come to help them? There is literally an issue with that at camp in the first Percy Jackson novel, The Lightning Thief. There is a cabin in Camp Half-Blood that is just full with demigod children who haven't been claimed by their parents. To be claimed by your godly parent means that they must acknowledge your existence in any way possible. For example, Poseidon will put a trident over the heads of his children. Athena will give her children a makeover that will last for days without ruining their makeup or their mascara. But for a lot of kids in that cabin, it seems as though their godly parents either didn't care or they forgot they existed. Uncle Rick lays it flat out that being a demigod is the worst. You are sent on missions after missions from age 11 to 17 with a very slim chance of living. Children go and they don't come back from these quests that their parents send them on. The same parents that barely acknowledge their existence. And this is the same fate that befalls Percy Jackson for when he arrives to Camp Half-Blood. He is not claimed by his godly parent. He is shoved into that cabin with all those unclaimed children. But at first, Percy isn't upset. He doesn't resent his godly parent for what they did. He is happy to finally belong to a society. He belongs in the cabin that doesn't belong anywhere. He goes to activities with them. He sits with them at the dining pavilion. He spends his days with his new cabin mates. Maybe one day he'll be claimed, but for now, he's content with where he is. Until he is claimed. Because of the promise with the big three, Percy has no godly siblings. He lives all by himself. He's all alone again. He eats his meals by himself. He does camp activities on his own. He trains by himself. Wait. He does not. He has one person that trains with him. His name is Luke. But this video isn't about Luke today. So I'll save him for another video. Percy resents his father, Poseidon, for leaving him alone again, taking away his cabin of friends. But this is what fuels Percy's fatal flaw. His fatal flaw being that he will sacrifice anything and everything for the people that he loves and cares about, whether it makes logical sense or not. Percy is not the strongest boy, nor is he the smartest. He's just a boy who's forced to live a life that he didn't want to live. And the same thing goes for his close friend Annabeth. Annabeth is the daughter of Athena, who is the goddess of knowledge. Annabeth holds her intellect higher than most. Even amongst her godly siblings, she is seen as one of the brightest. But being that smart pushes your emotions away. She has a hard time understanding how to keep close relationships with anyone, especially her family. She is very observant of others. We can tell by her first line in the book, "You drool while you sleep." She told that to Percy while she was watching him on the bed unconscious. Who does that? Who watches someone that intently while they're unconscious? Someone who wants to know more about the person that lays before them. Annabeth is one of the campers that stay at Camp Half-Blood year-round. Most campers come during the summer and then leave to go back home. But there are a few reasons why some people stay year-round. There are demigod children whose power is so strong that they attract monsters around them for miles and days on end. So they cannot live a normal life outside of camp. So they stay in the protected bubble that is Camp Half-Blood. There are also children who have no home to return to, whether their parents cannot live with having a demigod child, or their parents did not live long enough to stay with their demigod child. Annabeth chose to leave her father. Her father found a new wife and had 2 twin sons. Annabeth felt as though her father was choosing his new family over her, which was not the case. But she believed it because she believed her intellect was high. So she left. She left at the age of 8 and made her way into the big world where monsters knew that she was a demigod child all on her own. She was later found by two demigod children, a little older than her, named Thalia and Luke. Yes, the Luke that trained with Percy. They made their way across America to get to Long Island Sound so they could be safe in Camp Half-Blood's walls. They met up with the satyr Grover, who was supposed to be their protector. And as they made their way to Camp Half-Blood, Thalia was struck down and killed by Cyclops, something that Annabeth holds in her chest to this day as being her fault. Annabeth's fatal flaw is her hubris. She thinks that she is smarter than most, that she can handle any situation that comes her way, but that ends up putting her in situations that she cannot handle. And she doesn't understand how to process emotions from other people because of her hubris. And our last character, Grover Underwood. Now, you've heard me talk about Grover once before in Annabeth's story. Grover is a satyr who's tasked with protecting demigod children on their way to Camp Half-Blood. He is not like most satyrs, meaning he is far more cowardly and afraid than other satyrs his age. He doesn't even have his horns yet. Grover is riddled with the guilt of not being able to protect his demigod children and help them make their way to Camp Half-Blood. He's had to deal with failure after failure after failure, including Annabeth, Luke, and Thalia, as well as Percy's mother. He couldn't protect her. How does he call himself a protector if he can't protect anyone? Grover sees himself as weak, as someone who is not brave, when on the contrary, Grover is very brave. He just doesn't fit the mold of brave that everyone believes brave should be. For some reason, Grover believes that failing makes you weak, that making mistakes makes you lesser than. But Annabeth and Percy remind him constantly of just how important he is to their group. Without Grover, they wouldn't be the main three. He has wonderful ideas. He gets them out of sticky situations. Just because he's not a demigod wielding a sword or a demigod with amazing brains doesn't mean that he's lesser than the others. What's so amazing about Percy Jackson was that was only the main three characters. Each character, whether major or side, has wants, needs, desires, passions, regrets, flaws. Even the big three, no, even all the gods have flaws. Ares is rash and rude, while Athena uses her disdain for Poseidon to drive a wedge between her daughter and Percy's relationship. Poseidon tries his best to be a good father, but in the end, he's a god who is distant to his son. And that is only a small handful of the gods. The gods are supposed to be this flawless being, but they bicker and squabble like school children on a playground. They spend months on end in stalemates trying to decide what they want to do with the children that they've sired. The gods themselves are flawed. And that's what's so wonderful about Percy Jackson's characters. All of the characters are flawed, and them being flawed makes them feel real. Uncle Rick spends time fleshing out these characters, their loves, their hopes, their wishes, their desires, so that when you lose them, it hurts, because it feels as though you're losing someone you've known for forever. Even if you've met that character for the first time in that first book, their death still shakes you. This can't be real. They can't be dead. They have to come back. Uncle Rick is not afraid to kill off important characters either. Just ask the fans of the later Apollo series. Some still mourn to this day in group forms of the character they lost, because they love their characters so much. By the end of the series, Percy is no longer the same boy he was. Sure, his flaws are still there, but he's changed from the lessons he's learned, the things he's done, the people he's lost. He's grown from an 11-year-old boy to a 17-year-old man. And it's satisfying to finally get to that ending. The characters in Percy Jackson continue to grow and change regardless of where they are in the series, whether they're in a current iteration or they're in a spin-off series. Beating a big bad in the book doesn't mean that that's it. That doesn't mean you get a happy ever after. Beating a big bad of a series doesn't mean that's the end either. You'll run into the characters in sequel series still on quests, still trying to live out their lives as best as they can. Percy Jackson is a series. It's a franchise that grows with their readers. Whether they're 10 or 50, every page you turn, the story grows with you. It builds on itself. It builds on you. It leaves imprint on your soul. Percy Jackson, through its world, story, and characters, does something that no other series, no other franchise has done for me. It's made me feel that I wasn't just a reader in the journey, that I was a demigod alongside everyone in this journey. And that's why you should read Percy Jackson.